Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Now, there comes a point in life where the map stops working. The direction that once made sense no longer does, and the path ahead isn't clearly marked. So the question becomes, how do we move forward when you don't know exactly where you're going? Today, we are exploring that idea. Joining me is Patty Beer, a former airline captain and author whose work focuses on decision making, clarity, and what she calls wayfinding, learning how to navigate life when certainty disappears. Patty, welcome to Thoughts At Last. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So, Patty, before we kick things off, here on Thoughts At Last, I and my listeners, we want to get to know our guests on a personal level. So, if you don't mind, can you tell us more about yourself? What are your hobbies? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? And any other information that could help us get to know you better.
Absolutely. So, quick synopsis of my life. I grew up in an old order Mennonite community, which is a lot like the Amish, except that we had electricity and drove black cars instead of buggies. That
Yeah.
formed so that formed a big understanding of my life, and particularly as a woman, there was basically only one path. So when I talk about when the path stopped, there's real lived experience there, and that
Yeah.
that world got disrupted. And I eventually became an Air Force pilot and then an airline pilot and retired as a Boeing 777 captain after 30 years. In
Wow.
terms of my personal life, I'm married. I have two adult children and I'm retired now and retired from flying. And I have written four books. And my favorite color is lavender. My favorite food is it depends. It changes. Maybe watermelon. I
Okay.
grew up, so that gives you a little bit of the idea.
Wow. Once again, thank you so much, for coming on my podcast, and thank you for letting us get to know you. And once again, you're welcome to Thought At Last, Patty.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Patty, I want to start here. So, what does it actually mean to lose the map in life?
So to lose the map means what you thought was going to happen or what you expected should happen,
Yes.
or your expectations are gone. It can happen suddenly. It can happen because you choose to do something different. You decide you want something different, but you don't know how to do that yet. Um, and but you've made the decision. So it can happen from outside events. It can happen from trauma. It can happen from disruption in your culture, in your family, in your workplace, in your business. And it can happen from an internal decision where you simply choose something different, but you don't know where you're going yet.
Oh my. Funny how that's kind of like, how do I put it? Life is unpredictable, so losing the map seems like something that could happen at any time and at any point. And I think it happens a lot. I really hope I am wrong, but I think it does happen a lot to lots of people. But anyways, you're here to, help us find our way back through wayfinding. So you talked about wayfinding. How is that different, from simply figuring things out?
Well, um, let me get to that question here in just a moment. And let me say that
Yes.
losing the map is actually a normal part of life and it's healthy. It's part of growth, it's part of the cycle of growth. So it can be very unnerving if it happens unexpectedly, if it's not something that we chose, but it is a part of growth. And I can't imagine that there's nobody who goes through life where the map doesn't end at some point. Your
Exactly. I figured.
And your question about how does that different from figuring it out? The difference with wayfinding is that so part of when the map ends is we have all these maps in life. If you think about you're a child, right? And
Yes.
this is more of the case in the past that you grew up and you were like, I'll be a firefighter or I'll be a nurse or I'll be a lawyer or I'll be a plumber or I'll be an electrician. There was a paved path.
Yes.
And if you decided that's what you wanted to do, whether it was something you really liked or whether you just decided, um, hey, that's how I'll earn a living, that's how I'll survive. Either way, there was a paved path. You do this, and then you do this, and you do this. And the thing about wayfinding is that wayfinding also tunes into wayfinding assumes that you have a life path. It assumes that you have an unlived life inside you that wants to be lived, that asks to be lived. And it assumes that you're in touch with natural intelligence, higher intelligence, however you think of that, whether you think of that spiritually or whether you think of that as a collective unconscious, the collective conscious, somehow you're tuned into something bigger than yourself and an awareness of yourself of more than just two-dimensional of I have to survive. Um,
Yes.
so it takes into account who are you as an individual. It is about listening to yourself, and then it's also about listening to the feedback isn't really necessarily the communication from your environment, paying attention to synchronicities, paying attention to opportunities, paying attention to doors that open and also doors that close as information, as guidance.
Wow, thank you so much for that wonderful response, Patty. Now, Patty, most people tend to wait for clarity before they act or take any kind of action towards, changing their life or figuring things out. But is it really necessary to, to wait for clarity, or is it a criteria?
So that's a great question. And it's kind of a nuanced answer in that um, sometimes we have to wait for clarity and sometimes we have to take initiative. And when we're confused, when we're confused, what I would say is most often and I would also rather than think of clarity as a passive act, I think of that as an
Yes.
active act. Like when we are seeking clarity, when we are cultivating clarity, when we are going through that process of trying to find clarity, that's actually doing something. And so, what we might be asked to do in that moment is not to take action on the outside, it might be to
Yes.
take action of discernment. And if you do that, clarity drives its own actions. If you like, you can't wait forever for clarity, and clarity isn't necessarily about knowing all the answers. Clarity is about knowing the next answer. It's about understanding the environment. It's about understanding yourself. And it's about
Wow.
what is the next step do I take? Not do I know everything because you're not going to. I had a mentor who said to me once, and this forever stuck with me, and she said, guidance comes in advance of need. And I have found that to be true. Guidance comes in advance of need, but often right
Yeah.
before you need it, or sometimes 20 years in advance. It doesn't kind of sit around and there's something about clarity that activates you that pokes you.
Yes. Wow. Thank you so much for that wonderful response. Now, Patty, you've operated in high stakes environments like, aviation, and I have two questions when it comes to that. First off, do you have any, maybe a memorable story? Could be a funny one, could be one that had an impact on you from your time in aviation you would want to tell us? And also, how does decision making under pressure? Because I can't imagine what it's like to, fly a plane and, have people on board and need to make sure that you get them to their destination. That's a lot of responsibility. So do you have any, any story you'd want to tell us, and how does making decision under such pressure translate into, everyday life?
Okay, I'll answer those as sort of three separate questions.
Yeah.
One to your question. So I just wrote a book about this called Captain Patty's Wisdom Hacks 20 tools for clarity, wisdom, and self leadership. And I
Yes.
use some of these. I use the things that I learned in aviation, that I learned in parenting, and that I learned in gardening to illustrate concepts that people can take into their everyday life. Um, because I think that's so important for people to develop their own wisdom, their own clarity. So, one of those tools that I talk about in the book is,
Yes.
and you said a funny story. So,
Yeah.
as a pilot, we go through. um, simulator training, and we um, practice all these emergencies. And as you might imagine, there is a standard operating procedures you go through when you have an emergency in the airplane. You're always taught aviate, navigate, communicate. You're taught how to prioritize what to do in a situation that is fast moving, that is life or death, and that
Yes.
you have to react. So one day we're sitting there in the simulator, and our instructor says to us, I was a young co-pilot at that point, and the instructor says, "What's the first thing you do in an emergency?" And so the group of us all responded like trained parrots, and we said what I just said: aviate, communicate, navigate. And he looked at
Yes.
us and he said, "No." He said, "The first thing you do in an emergency is pull out your box lunch." We had these packed
What?
lunches we would take on long missions. And we
Yeah.
all looked at him like he had three heads. We're like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "The first thing you do in an emergency is you pull out your box lunch and you eat it." And then he went on to explain, and he said, "Listen, in an emergency," he said, "you can get things really wrong by reacting. You can shut down the wrong engine, you can step on the wrong rudder pedal, and you can make things way worse." And what he
Yes.
said was, there's almost no emergency where you don't have a little bit of time to just stop and do nothing and to evaluate what's going on so that you don't make it worse. And so eat your box lunch obviously is not taken literally. You don't have that much time, but it was a way to think about when you're in a high pressure, fast moving situation, you're caught off guard, eat your box lunch, take a little bit of
Yeah.
time. So that's a
Wow.
story from aviation. Your story about your question about what is it like to carry that responsibility um,
Yes. Into everyday life. Yes.
into everyday life. So in 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 everyday life, so you can take all of these same lessons in everyday life. You can take eat your box lunch. You can take one of the other ones I talk about is new day, new jet, which is starting over, not carrying yesterday's mistakes into today's mistakes or into today's actions.
Yes.
You can take things like that and you can apply them to your ordinary life because flying goes, as a pilot, flying goes a lot faster than ordinary life, right? It
Yeah.
moves faster, it has emergencies, it has crises, it has a relationship in terms of how do you work with other people for the best outcome. But if you slow it all down, it's not really any different than ordinary life. We're going to have things that where the map ends, right? When an emergency happens and you're on your way to some other destination and you lose an engine, you're not going to your destination, most likely. You're going to divert somewhere. And
Yes.
then you have to rethink things. So you can take all of these same things that you find in aviation, it's not so different, and just apply them to your life. It's just at a slower speed.
Wow. Thank you so much for that wonderful response, Patty. Now, Patty, how do you deal with uncertainty?
So uncertainty is an interesting concept. Uh, so for a long time, I had a lot of self doubt. Grew up in an atmosphere that was designed to induce self doubt in certain people, and was also dysfunctional and traumatic. So you come out of those doubting yourself. Your reality is destabilized. But here's what I have come to see as well: is that the other side of uncertainty is that if you use it to ask questions, if you get curious about it, rather than feel like it is something that shouldn't be happening or that you should know something. If you just ask curious questions, there's an enormous amount of agency in that, and there's an enormous amount of learning and greater perspective. And so it shouldn't be that uncertainty is a bad thing. It should be something that we welcome uncertainty because uncertainty is a gateway to greater knowledge. It's a gateway to growth and personal development.
Wow. Thank you so much for that wonderful response, Patty. Now, to add to everything you said, I was having a conversation with my friend one time, and I told him that you need to understand something, bro. There is only so much in life that you can control. and it's just one thing. So he was like, "What is it?" I was like, "Well, before I say it, I'm going to tell you something." Now, you need to understand that almost everything you have can and and may be taken away from you. I was like, to the point that they could even take your arms and your legs. He found it difficult to believe. I was like, it's true. You could be involved in an accident and you could lose one of your legs or both of them or both arms. It's very possible. But I was like, one thing that can never take away from you is your mind. Your mind is yours. Nobody can take it away from you. In fact, the only way to take away your mind is to essentially end your life. So I was like, that is the one thing that you can control. Lots of things are going to happen to you in life which are uncertain. They were not planned for. Or probably you had plans, you had arrangements, but they did not come to fruition. That's just life. But I do believe that how you react to those situations is very important. You can either, take it the wrong way, become depressed, probably become an alcoholic or commit suicide, or you can be like, we know Americans, there's something they say. I don't say anything profane, but you know, stuff happens. Yeah, I believe
Oh,
you know.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's just how it is, right? So the best thing would just be, how do I react to what has happened? It's uncertain because you're not really certain of anything. I can't say what's going to happen after I'm done with this conversation and I go about my day. I cannot say what I'm going to do next or what will happen next. What I can do is I can just be careful enough to make sure that I don't make any mistake or do anything that would put me in any kind of jeopardy. But then again, I still cannot predict what's going to happen. Even if I'm 100, 1,000% careful, something uncertain could still happen. It's how I react to what happens that matters. So that's one of the mindset I actually used to kind of like deal with uncertainties. And it's almost the same with you. It's literally the same with yours because you said, well, it's something to learn from. Oh, this happened because I wasn't aware, I did not know. Now I've learned my lesson. So this is what I will try to do different when I encounter a similar scenario once again. So yeah, that's was what I wanted to add. Okay,
Well,
so let me okay.
can I add one thing to that as it relates to wayfinding?
Yes, of course.
So sometimes that what happens to us is actually a doorway. And that has been my experience. So things happen, stuff happens outside of us that we don't have any control. We didn't cause to happen. We didn't want to happen. We didn't know was going to happen. And I don't want to promote the idea that you like spiritual bypassing, that you make lemons out of lemonade, but
Yeah.
because I think that there's nuance there. There can be damage there. But what I do want to say is sometimes when these things happen, when a door closes, it's actually because that wasn't the right path for us. It's actually because there was not something wrong or something we did wrong, but because something in us is like, yeah, no, that's not your path. And just hold on, a different door will open. And
Mm.
so we can hold uncertainty that way too.
Wow. 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 Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that wonderful response, Patty. Now, Patty, in aviation, small errors can compound quickly. Do you think life also works that way?
Absolutely. And that's great insight. I'm not sure how many people know that about aviation, but it's called the chain of errors. And it's one of the things that we're taught to notice early errors and to correct them quickly, and then
Yes.
also to become aware of when they start to stack up and to interrupt the chain of errors because what you're referring to is crashes are rarely caused by one catastrophic error, almost never. You can look at accident investigations, and that's just a very rare thing. They're usually a chain of errors. Somebody made a mistake, and then somebody else, and then, or you got tired, and it was at the end of a long day and a long set of errors. So, yes,
Yes.
life is absolutely the same way. And it's one of the things where um, it's one of the reasons why we want to get good at not, let me choose my words here carefully. We want to
Okay.
get good at acknowledging I made a mistake, right? We're human, we all make mistakes. We want to get good at saying, oh, I messed that up. Yeah, I missed that. Oh, and correcting it.
Yes.
Because because when we get stuck in certainty or we get stuck in thinking we should never make mistakes, then we can't admit it. And if we can't admit a mistake, you can't correct it. And so relationships operate the same way. A lot of little mistakes add up to a chain of errors until there's a crash in the relationship, right?
Yes.
Same thing with money. A lot of little mistakes. I'm spending money on takeout and a lot of little things that I don't think add up. And at the end of the month, they do add up. They add up to a lot. Same thing at work. Well, I just won't show up to work today, or I'll show up late, or no big deal, right? And that becomes a pattern, and it adds up to something. So if we can correct those things early without judgment, without going, I'm a terrible person, or I shouldn't make mistakes, if we can just quickly go, yep, that wasn't good. Let's correct it. And what I would say is, one of the ways that we did this in aviation is that by the end of my career, we were required to take out a briefing card after a flight and to go over what
Yes.
went well and what went poorly. And it drew our attention to what had happened, what we could do differently. And I think most of all, it um, destigmatized admitting to mistakes. It just took the edge out. Everybody did it. It's like we all make mistakes. Just what happened there? Why did it happen? How did we get behind the airplane? What will we do differently the next time?
Yes. Wow. Wow. Another thing I love about your field, aviation, is the fact that there's a saying, hope is not a strategy. I mean, and NASA is a part of the aviation sector, right?
Yes,
I mean, when NASA wants to send a rocket to space, they don't go like, you know what, we are done building the rocket. We hope it doesn't crash. I mean, of course, no, they have contingency upon contingency upon contingency. They try to analyze every possible scenario of this, this rocket crashing, this rocket exploding. What could happen? Okay, let's say this happen. If this happens, what would be the result? If that happens, what would be the result? Let's say we launch when it's raining. What's going to happen? Let's say we launch when it's too hot. What will happen? Let's say it's launch when the weather is even optimal. What will happen? They test for all kinds of scenarios. The same goes for aviation. I mean, the pilot doesn't wake up in the morning, goes into the plane hangar, boards the plane, and calls the passengers to board the airplane to and yeah, let's take off. They have to do some checks. They have to do lots of things before the airplane can definitely lift off the airport and even take passengers with it, if I'm not mistaken.
that's
So
correct.
okay, so what I mean is one could approach life the same way. Because if you approach life that way, it means that automatically, even without you even admitting to it, you are already inadvertently agreeing to the fact that you can make mistakes. So you need to, okay, I'm about to do this job. I'm about to go into this endeavor. What could go wrong? Okay, let's say if I do like this could happen, that could happen. You could learn from other people's experience. You could just accept, of course, you can do all that and things can still go haywire, things can still go south, things can still go wrong, and that's just life. So that was what I wanted to add to it.
Yeah, for sure. And if you have thought your way through those things, you're far better prepared because you've anticipated them.
Yes,
You've
yes,
anticipated them
awesome.
and you've probably already thought, in your description there, you're already thinking, what would I do? If this happens, what would I do? And so mentally, you're already prepared. It's training.
Exactly, which is a wonderful thing. Now, what role does trust in yourself play when navigating uncertainty? I've noticed that there are times that there were times, not nowadays, not nowadays though there are times where I'm saying, oh my God, I may lose a little bit of trust in my ability, but initially it used to be way worse where I would even begin to doubt myself and start thinking maybe I'm just dumb or something. But how important is trust in oneself it when it comes to, navigating uncertainty?
Well, that's a great question. And I think I think that not trusting yourself when you don't get the results that you were expecting, or a door closes or something, it can undermine your trust in yourself. And so what I would define trust in yourself is your habits. I say your habits are your wealth. And so if you have a habit pattern of um, those are things you can trust in. It's so when I think about trusting in yourself, like a belief in yourself, but it is a belief. There is, if you trust in your habits, if you trust in what you have built, then you have
Yes,
evidence for why you should trust in yourself. Like, I don't know if this is going to work out or not. I don't know how this is going to play with another person, but I'm going to show up. And it comes back to what you said earlier, controlling what you can control. You can trust
yes,
in yourself if you're willing to control what you can control. What, do I show up? Do I prepare? Do I do the work? Do I admit when I made a mistake? Do I recalibrate? Those are things, those habit patterns are what you can trust in. And then the question is, what other habit patterns do you need to develop so that you can trust in going forward?
Wow. Thank you for that wonderful response. And to add to it before, I move on to the next question. It's like you said, you understand. Trusting yourself just has to do with the fact that you don't trust your ability, which means you need to improve on your current skill set, on your current ability. And that has to do with, showing up, studying, practicing, getting better. I think initially that was what it was for me. I'm glad that I had the self-awareness to notice that, oh, I'm lacking in my abilities. That's why I don't trust. It's not like I don't trust myself per se. What I don't trust is my current abilities, and I need to get better. So I think that was where I don't know if it's I got the realization the way I'm saying it now, but I know that back then, probably along the lines of that, I was able to improve, and right now I'm still getting better, but I'm moving forward. That's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so
Thank you.
important because we often think that what we need to do is cultivate belief in ourselves, absent of developing skills or absent of developing habits
Yes.
and like mantras or things like that. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like your
Honestly.
belief in yourself comes from what you have proven to yourself.
Yeah.
It's just imagine it's somebody else, right? Like
Yes.
you're going to believe in what they do, not what they say. You're going to believe in whether they show up or not. It's the same thing with
Exactly.
self-trust. If I were standing on the other side of me, would I believe me um because I have done what I said I was going to do?
Yes.
It's the same thing.
Honestly, I love that example that you gave. Just think of you as another person. Would you actually believe what she just said? Oh my God, I'm so perfect. I don't need to improve on myself. Are you serious right now? Are you serious? Would you actually believe that if you were someone else? And I love that example you gave. That example was wonderful. And now, zooming out, do you think life is meant to be navigated or discovered?
I think that they're the same thing. I
Oh wow.
think that as we discover, um, and maybe they're slightly different too, in that I think we're meant to discover, but the navigation portion is taking action. And so sometimes discovery can be, oh wow, that's just learning, right? And then
Yes.
navigation is the applied learning. But
Oh wow.
you can't navigate if you haven't expanded your awareness and discovered something new because you don't really have much material to work with. So I use this example from it's a principle of flying, it's a principle of fluid dynamics, is that you have
Yes.
to gather this wide, if you think about a garden hose, right?
Yeah.
And you start with a lot of water coming out of it. It doesn't come out with a lot of force, but if you squeeze that garden hose, you have a lot of force, you have a lot of power. And when we're building something new, it's the same thing. We have to let me back up and say, if you only have a little bit of trickle of water, you can squeeze it and you can get a lot of force, but you're going to get a lot less. But it's the same
Yes.
way when we're discovering and navigating is we have to develop a fair amount of material. We have to think about what we want. We have to try some things before we focus. But when we
Yes.
focus that, then we can create a lot of momentum and a lot of force in our life. So discovery, the first part, we're creating that quantity, and then navigation, we're narrowing it, we're focusing it to give it force
Yes.
and movement.
Honestly, Patty, I love the way you break things down. I love the way you answer this question. I honestly thought, navigating life and discovering probably aspects or things about life are different, whereas they are kind of one and the same, or at least they run along the same line.
Yeah.
So, from what you said, I think the way I understood it is the discovery aspect is you learning anything and probably everything you can about life. Then navigating is from everything you've learned, what are the things you find useful for maybe the goals or the kind of life you want to achieve, the goals you want to achieve, and the kind of life you want to live? What are the tools that from everything you've discovered that you can use to navigate your way to that particular goal or particular kind of life you want to achieve. That's just a very simple, straight to the point definition. I believe my listeners were able to, grab that. Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful response.
Yeah, and can I add one more example?
Of course, yes, please.
So I used to tell so some people focus too soon and then some people never focus. And I used to explain it to um, my coaching clients. I would say, here, we're just going to throw spaghetti up against the wall, right? We're just going to make a mess, throw everything out
Yeah,
there. Don't tell me what you think is important right now. Don't try to focus. Just throw everything out there. And then what we're going to do, we're going to look at that spaghetti on the wall and we're going to see what the patterns are. We're going to see what stands out, what's most important, and then we're going to focus on it. And so it's kind of a prioritization like that. Just
yes.
start out not worrying about where it's going to go, but then eventually you do have to focus.
Yes, yes. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Now, Patty, I have a sort of rapid fire questions I want to ask you. You can either answer with a phrase or a sentence. And I want you to know that both options are available. If you feel you cannot pick one or the other, you can pick both options. So the first question is, are you ready? The first question
Yes.
is clarity or certainty?
Clarity.
Definitely. Plan or instinct?
What was the first one?
Plan.
Plan or
Plan.
instinct? Both.
Actually, yeah. Control or adaptation?
Um, Neither.
Oops. That okay. Okay. What option would you suggest?
I would suggest initiative and adaptation,
Oh
or
my. Okay.
initiative and yeah, I'm not sure what the second word is.
The second word is control and adaptation. That was a question.
Yeah, I was trying to think about how I think about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's what I would say. I would say
Okay.
initiative and creativity in place of those two.
All right. Do you care to expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So, control. So the way you're using control is I can't things outside of my control, but I often think that we get caught up in the way I often think that control is understood as like a force of control. And so
Yes.
control or adaptation has overtones of like domination or submission. So for me, I'm like, well, it's really neither of those. Like, do you have to collaborate with the environment? Does collaboration mean that you're adapting? Yes. Can you control the environment? No. So what I would say is we need to take initiative. We need to act on our own. Um, we need to plant our flag. We need to act on what we think is the right direction to go. And then we also have to we're in relationship with other people and other things, and we have to take that
Yes.
into account as well. So we have to be creative about how we are in relationship.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for that wonderful clarification. Now, the final one is, what is one word that defines direction for you?
One word that defines direction. One word. It's one phrase. Call to adventure.
Oh wow. Yeah, I love that. I love that. A call to adventure. Wow, that's
A
wonderful.
call to adventure, yeah. And you
Yeah,
know it when you feel it, and it's undeniable and it doesn't let you go.
yes, 100%. Yes. Now, this is my final question before we wrap up. When you step back and you reflect on everything you've learned, you've achieved, and the wonderful life you've lived, what is one idea about decision making or life direction that you think people misunderstood the most? That you think people misunderstand the most?
What I think that people misunderstand about navigation or direction, I think probably the thing that people most misunderstand is the way in which it can go two ways. They don't think that they have a choice.
Yes.
And B, the second thing I think that people misunderstand is not being aware of how much our environment influences our choices. And that when we see the environment clearly, when we have clarity about the environment, then we can make different choices. because we're not making it, we're not subtly influenced. We
by the environment. Mm.
Yeah, I had a instructor in coaching school say the environment always wins, and it just always struck with me. And I was like, well, the environment always wins until you understand the environment. You can't if you understand if you go off into the wilderness and you have no idea of the conditions of, say, Arctic wilderness or something like that, right? You're not
Yes.
going to do very well. But if you understand what the conditions of that environment are, how it impacts you, then you probably will. And so, probably the biggest thing people don't understand is how much their culture, their conditioning, their upbringing, their um, the systems that they live in affect their thinking.
Yeah, yes, their beliefs, their values, and I
Yes.
totally agree. I agree
Yep.
with you. Like, I believe you could tell from my accent that I live in Africa. I live in West Africa, and for a fact, West Africa isn't necessarily known for its, technological superiority or economical superiority, that kind of stuff. There are lots of limited, even maybe way less than limited opportunities here, and it takes a lot for someone to really stand out. Sometimes
Yes.
for people to even stand out where I live, you literally have to indulge in something, should I say, illegal. So that kind of stuff. So doing something legal, yeah, and becoming prosperous and doing very well takes a lot, honestly. And I've noticed that lots of the people here don't really understand or see how the environment, affects them, especially when psychologically, cognitively, and intellectually. So that's why I try to, learn outside the scope of my environment. It's even one of the reasons why I started this podcast, to be able to speak with people from different parts of the world. Even if I cannot experience, culture physically, I can experience it virtually just by having conversations with different people from different parts of the world. I can just get an idea of what it must be like to live with them, how they think differently, how they perceive life, what the work life is, how the economy affects how they think, and that kind of stuff. Then, with all this perspective, I can begin to see myself not just as a West African citizen or a Nigerian citizen. I can begin to see myself as a global citizen. And the world is literally my oyster. All I have to do
Yes.
is just increase my economic capacity so I can change my physical experience, change my environment, and change my physical experience in essence. So I think that's about it. Honestly,
Absolutely. And I think one of the
yes,
things you can bring too is people like we think that so there's also a risk to standing out in a positive way, in that other people are jealous or other people are nervous about it. But when you stand
yes,
out, you make it possible for others to go, oh, okay, there's a path there. And the world doesn't end. People might react to you strongly in positive or negative ways, but the path doesn't end.
yes. I could even give you an example. There was a time I was having a discussion with some of my friends, and I just kind of said something. They have there's a way society operates where there's a general belief or a general narrative, and if you tend to speak against that belief or that narrative, people will look at you and be like, why did you
Right.
say why? So there was a time I said something of the sort, and they all looked at me like, bro, what's happening to you? Have you been watching some videos online? I was like, you know what? I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I didn't, because trying to convince them, how do I put it? You would risk actually, losing your friendship or even creating enemies for yourself. So it's just better to just take a chill pill and just forget about it. And provided it's not, how do I put it? The beliefs that they have and what, man, I don't want to go into details, but it's just crazy. I think you can understand. I believe you would understand, definitely.
For
But
sure.
anyway,
It's a risk analysis.
yeah,
It's a risk
yeah,
analysis. It's like if it's important, if it's really important, you have to do it. But it
yeah,
comes with a cost,
that's the thing.
and I think people think that being successful in whatever way that is, academically or financially or whatever, is, oh yay, that's, you live happily ever after. But you go, there's a cost. Not
Yes.
everybody's happy about you leaving your neighborhood or thinking of yourself as a global citizen or getting out of your culture or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah, there's that too. Patty, it's been such a pleasure to have you on my podcast. Thank you for, taking out time out of your busy schedule to come here and share your wisdom with us. It's been really been such a pleasure. How can my listeners, connect with you, learn more about your work, and, possibly get copies of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure being on here and hearing about your experiences and your thinking as well. So
Yes.
people can find me at theflyingclub.com. And I have my list of books are on there. They can also find my books on Amazon. I've written a book on parenting. I wrote a memoir of growing up old order Mennonite and becoming a pilot. I wrote the latest book was on the wisdom hacks, and that's a little book. That's a little gift book of wisdom and that people can apply to their ordinary lives. So they can find that online in Kindle or hardcover. And I'm on Facebook under Patty Bear Author and Instagram Patty Bear Author as well. So I'd love to meet
Oh,
people from around the world.
awesome. So, Patty, honestly, I'm not going to that. That's a lot of links. So I'll need you to send them to me on Podmatch so I
You
can
got it.
attach it to the show notes of the video, of the recording, because I'm going to post on YouTube and post on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So once again, Patty, it's really been a pleasure to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for, like I said before, taking out time of your busy schedule to be here. It's really a pleasure. I appreciate it so much. You have no idea. So before we finally wrap up and close for the day, do you have any food for thoughts, any finishing words you want to leave I and my listeners?
I would just ask your listeners to pay attention to the call to adventure in their own lives. It's often small. It's usually not a loud voice. Just pay attention to it. You don't have to follow it. You can question it, but just pay attention to it. Start noticing it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Once again, Patty, thank you so much. I really hope you had a nice time on Thoughts Atlas podcast. And please don't forget to leave a review on the podcast. It helps me to find, wonderful, beautiful guests like yourself.
Thank you so much. Will do.
Okay, do take care and have a wonderful day.
You too.